everybody, welcome to the New Zealand Shoulder Elbow Therapist Conference here in Arrowtown. I'm Margie Old and everybody's going to introduce themselves and then enjoy our podcast.
Hi, I'm Pratnya. I'm a physiotherapist from Auckland.
Hi, I'm Liz Hanson. I'm a physio and hand therapist from the Waikato, and I'm the matriarch. I'm the oldest.
Hi, Angela Cadogan, specialist physiotherapist from Christchurch.
Hi, I'm Sarah Betteridge, physiotherapy specialist in shoulders in Christchurch.
Hi, I'm Paul Timothy. I'm a physiotherapist in Christchurch.
And I'm Jane Dickerson. I'm a physiotherapist in Dunedin.
So welcome to our chats. I hope you enjoy the podcast. Let me introduce you. So welcome to New Zealand Shoulder Elbow Therapist Fireside Chat. David O'Brien, it's wonderful to have you here. We're currently in this beautiful house in Arrowtown next to a fire, and we've got a number of questions that we wanted to ask you, mainly around your PhD work and what it is around arthroscopic Bankart repair and rehab that we wanted to talk to you about. So we're just interested to hear your thoughts. We are day 2 into the conference. So far so good, but like I said, it's very stimulating, and we're learning lots, I guess, from surgeons and talking to them about the type of operations that they do. There's not such a heavy content on the rehabilitation side, which is why we wanted to speak to you, I guess, and hear your thoughts. Do you want to share with us why you're doing your PhD, what your premise of the work is, and what you think is important in that space?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on. I suppose in a nutshell, I've kind of fallen into this project to some degree because I started working with a shoulder surgeon quite closely a few years ago. And in terms of the protocols that he was following for the different things that he was doing, there are stabilisations, but also cuff repairs and reverse shoulder replacements in particular, the main ones, but also some of the trauma that he does, so fractures and things like that. I guess I was finding that patients were quite commonly sort of lingering, I suppose, for want of a better term, in slings and holding off from doing things for quite a long time when it felt like they could be doing things a little bit earlier. And then I suppose I went and tried to look into the evidence behind some of these protocols that he was using, and effectively found that it was not really based on any kind of clinical practice, any kind of clinical research at all. So I started wondering, how has this all been devised? And it kind of seems like, and again, from a surgical perspective, I think surgeons' minds work quite differently to physios' minds, and in a surgeon's brain, they kind of go, we've got a problem, we need to fix it, we need to wait till it heals, then we can worry about what we do about it. Whereas a physio is kind of thinking a little bit more around, should we be immobilizing these people for 6 weeks, or should we be immobilizing them for a shorter period? We know that there's a lot of change that happens with immobilization, negative change in particular, with regards to sort of tissue quality, neuroplasticity, weakness, and all these other things. So I guess I just started questioning what I was doing, and as a result kind of just found that there wasn't really any clinical research specifically on stabilizations. I kind of looked at cuff repairs and reverse shoulder arthroplasties, and there was a lot more research on those, and a lot harder to find gaps in the knowledge, I suppose. Whereas Bankart repairs in particular, there are almost no comparative studies between different rehab protocols. So, the latest consensus, which sort of has prescribed a specific protocol, was in 2010, and it was based on sort of basic science and not really any clinical evidence. So I guess that's what triggered my interest in the first place. And I thought, I wanted to dig a little bit deeper at that point in my career. So I decided I'd do a PhD in it.
Yeah. Some of the work we've been listening to today, I'm just going to butt in for people. Some of the work is around how useful is arthroscopic Bankart repair. I'm going to go straight to latter, especially in that contact collision athlete. Is there a reason that you chose the Bankart repairs, I guess, open or arthroscopic? And do you think that what we apply, do you think they're different, the rehab different for different types of stabilization surgeries? Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of chose the arthroscopic Bankart repairs because it's the most common, and I think it's the vast majority of stabilizations, well, in the past sort of 10, 15 years probably, but I think you're right in that a lot of surgeons, particularly with higher level athletes now, are moving directly to latarjets. And one of the studies that I've been looking at is actually interviewing surgeons and physios around their practices on this. And one of them who does a lot of elite sport in the UK actually basically said that he, am I still there? Sorry.
Yeah, you're still there. Carry on.
Basically that anyone who's had a dislocation, he doesn't bother with a Bankart repair anymore. He goes straight to a latarjet. And the Bankart repair he kind of reserves primarily for symptomatic labral pathology, which is interesting. I guess the reason picking one or the other is that if you go straight to a latarjet and then the shoulder dislocates again, you're in a fair bit of trouble. And the Bankart repair gives you, an option to then go to a latarjet later on if it's successful. So I guess it's that kind of stepped approach to intervention as opposed to going straight to the Hail Mary to some degree. So that's my understanding of how the decision making is. And yeah, I think you're right. There seems to be a bit more interest in how useful the Bankart repair actually is, which is something that's quite interesting that I find as well, because when you think about all the forces that are acting on a shoulder and you're repairing this, it increases the surface of the glenoid a little bit, and it might provide a little bit of a sort of passive anterior restraint at the front of that shoulder joint. But, I think if you're going to have a significant force coming at that shoulder enough to dislocate it, in a lot of cases, it's going to kind of depend very heavily on the muscle protection and that dynamic stability there as opposed to the passive structures anyway. So, and it's very hard to research that. So, might have got a bit off track there, but so in terms of I suppose how I got into that specific type of surgery and there's definitely different rehab protocols around the different types of stabilization surgery. Primarily, I suppose, because in latarjets you're looking at bony union as opposed to soft tissue labrum to bone, which has a very different sort of healing time frame and a different healing reliability, I suppose. So you probably, but there are different parts of that, I suppose, because I guess latarjets historically are returning to full contact sports generally a little bit faster, I think. Whereas in the UK now, I think because they've modified their rehab protocols there, soft tissue Bankart repairs are getting back into full contact sport quite quickly as well. Some as early as sort of 3 months post-op. So, I mean, there's a huge amount of decision making that goes on between which type of surgery to do, and then I guess that would impact on different considerations for the patient. How long it might take to rehab, return to sport, things like that. But I suspect maybe they're coming a little bit closer together these days in terms of those recovery timeframes. So, does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's great. Who else want to have a question?
Just going to scoot up. Hi, David. I'm Stuart Betteridge, a physio specialist here in New Zealand. My question was related to your work and your study. Are there any particular patients that you wouldn't necessarily accelerate?
Yeah. So, I suppose the thing that that keeps coming up is this, I guess, discrepancy between accelerating and maybe just, I guess it is if you're going faster than what's the status quo at the moment. But when you approach a surgeon with an accelerated protocol, they get very nervous. So the way I've kind of been phrasing it and what we're trying to work towards now is more of a criterion-based progression through those rehabs as opposed to, let's just halve all of the time frames, because I think time frames are notorious for not taking into account individual patient metrics, like you've kind of alluded to there. So I suspect with a criterion-based protocol that you're moving through, that will probably accelerate things a little bit for the most patients. But in terms of ones that you'd probably want to go a little bit slower, I suspect the ones that have slightly more damage initially. If they've got any kind of glenoid damage there, I suspect they're probably not having a Bankart repair anyway. But depending on the quality of that capsular tissue that's being repaired, any sort of more hypermobile patients, they're always going to struggle a little bit more, and you'd probably want them to, almost get a little bit more rigidity in that repair before you're trying to really stress it out too much. Your young males that are probably more likely to dislocate again, you might even hold back a little bit more. It depends a little bit on someone's an elite athlete as well, if they've gone through the process before. On the other side, these are all sort of different factors that I'm finding from the interviews I've been doing, and I sort of find myself changing my own practice, well, almost every couple of weeks after I've talked to a couple of new people about it. Not drastically, but in terms of considering things that I might not have thought about before. But I think it's really tough to, I guess, know any patients that you specifically want to go a little bit slower with. But the main ones would be the hypermobile ones, the ones with poor quality joint capsular tissue, labral tissue, the ones that maybe have needed a few more anchors, have had sort of more circumferential tear, would probably be the main ones, I suppose. And the ones that you might accelerate a little bit faster are the ones that have that better supervision. So, if you're working with elite athletes and you're able to see them regularly, multiple times a week, really closely supervise them, they've got good quality muscle going into it, they've potentially had that surgery closer to the injury, and they're probably in a better shape going into it. They'll come out of it in a better shape as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And with regards to the criterion, the things that you are thinking about in terms of progressing, like in New Zealand, we're relatively conservative here. We've talked a few weeks ago, didn't we, about how that looks. The plan that you think in terms of progressing based on criterion, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great
What
question.
criteria, I guess, is what I'm looking for.
Yeah, well, that is the million-dollar question. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
What do you know?
Whether it's even possible to, I guess, delineate a set of criteria that can cover every single patient in every sport and every age group and all these things, which maybe it's not. But I guess, if we're looking at criteria for, say, ACL rehab, you've got these fairly stringent criteria now to move through different phases. You're looking at different strength measures and stuff like that. It's probably going to be around primarily the first sort of 2 to 3 months out from the surgery, and around sling use. It's going to be, this is exactly what I'm working on at the moment. It's probably going to be a little bit subjective even, and a little bit arbitrary. So, the things that you're looking for in terms of getting someone out of a sling are their pain, their confidence, their quality of movement, I suppose, whether they've got good activation in those cuff muscles in a range. You tend to find some people as well, if they're, a bit more painful and their movement quality isn't as good, or the surgeon might have tightened them up a little bit more, then, you might want to sort of be a bit hesitant there. So I guess the speed that they're getting their range back, most physios are kind of setting movement quality that I've talked to, are setting kind of movement quality and range of motion as kind of the early things that you're looking to work on, and then moving more into strength stuff after that. In terms of how long you're spending in the sling, I suppose the things you're looking out for are, reduced, zero pain effectively at rest, good movement quality, and good axioscapular movement and glenohumeral movement, and and then starting to look at criteria for progressing through those things. I think so I've been working a little bit with Jo Gibson on trying to figure this out, I suppose. And the paper that she published in 2016, they were kind of using the CKC UEST, the closed chain, long-winded test, quite early on in the process to determine whether they're ready to start doing things in slightly out of range. And but this is going to be the challenge part of this particular study. So and everyone that I've spoken with so far in the interviews don't have any hard and fast criteria moving through that first kind of probably 8 weeks or so, which is the bit that I'm most interested in. But yeah, I think it'll probably be around pain, movement quality, range of motion, and maybe sort of strength in a range, progressing into outer range, something along those lines. But I'm sorry I don't have anything more solid for you.
in that space will be, it's so subjective, isn't it? Like what I might say is good movement quality might be different than Ange or different than Paul. Do you know, like
Yeah,
how that's going to be another challenge, isn't it?
definitely. Yeah, massive challenge. So,
Things.
yeah, and this is literally the discussion that I've started having probably in the last week or two, and it's been very preliminary at this stage, and just trying to figure out what that might look like, and have to be a little bit, yeah, and I think probably that there will still be things like, you know, a lot of protocols. I think and from memory, I think in New Zealand the slings sort of kept in the picture for sort of 4 to 6 weeks, whereas in you know, the UK it's kind of like 10 days to sort of 3 weeks, and then, you know, it's kind of like by the 3 week mark we want to be rid of it entirely. So I suppose in terms of like the sling use, it's more about, you know, whether the patient's feeling okay about it, I suppose, and giving them some power to progress through it themselves. If you educate them on things that, you know, they shouldn't be stressing probably in that early period, like, you know, combined abduction, external rotation, you're not pushing into any pain, you're not doing these sorts of things. It's going to be a little bit probably around how the patient's feeling as much as the clinician as well. So yeah, but it will be probably a little bit fluffy.
Yeah, I guess one of the other challenges, sorry, is just the protocols are really great for the lowest common denominator, and you know, and I think like some of our surgeons here in New Zealand are quite protective around, but and maybe rightly so, looking for that lowest common denominator. Do you have any thoughts around how to make a, a protocol that allows the patient to progress but is still safe, I guess, for everybody to use? The challenge, isn't it?
I've got a bit of a hypothesis on all this, and it's that a patient, and one of the questions I've been asking in my interviews is, have you had a patient who's redislocated during that initial sort of rehab period, or one that's kind of really, I guess, undone all of the surgical work? And it seems to be uncannily rare, or almost not existent. And my suspicion is in that initial period, that a patient who's sensible, who's been given the right advice and given that responsibility, will kind of inherently know how much they can push it in the first place anyway. And I think, you know, you're judging that from the patient too, but you know, I guess the question that the surgeon has around that is, how much movement can you do and how much stress can you put on that repair as it's healing? And at what point is that quote unquote healed enough that you can start stressing it out? And you know, I think in the Netherlands and you know, where the re-guide consensus came from, and Belgium, places around there, kind of in that little pocket, it's effectively now, you know, rehab this as the patient feels comfortable. You're gradually exposing them to these things as they're demonstrating they're sort of confident and competent moving through those things as well. So, and there aren't really any time-based milestones there. It's more a case of how the patient's feeling. So I guess my hypothesis is that if you give the patient some responsibility in that, then as long as they're educated on what they're trying to protect and how to do that, then they're not going to stress it out too much, and they'll probably be safe enough to help, I guess, in that process of progressing through things. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? So, hi, I'm Pratnya, I'm from Auckland. So, I have a question. I mean, interesting, like, you know, as you say, the protocol is going to be subjective, but within that protocol, apart from strengthening, are you looking at deciding or decision where would you introduce certain different type of exercises? Like some might need more neuromuscular control type of exercises. How would you structure that in the rehab?
Yeah, fantastic question. If you've got any suggestions, I'm open to them. But I suppose my feeling with this is almost very simplistic, insofar as a patient will, if they've got poor control, if they've got poor range, if they've got pain, then that'll naturally sort of inhibit how much they'll be wanting to do anyway. And as they're progressing through things, they'll find that these things are unlocking as they get more control, as they get more strength, as they get more range. And I guess to some degree, what I'm wanting to test out is whether these things will sort of come together naturally, I suppose. And if you've got someone who's a little bit more, anxious, or who's a little bit less robust around the shoulder for whatever reason, things like that, it'll naturally come out in that they're probably progressing through these things maybe at a slightly slower pace. And yeah, I guess the really tricky thing will be to sort of figure out exactly when you can get these out to be able to take to somebody on the other side of the world and say, this is the criteria you're looking for, crack on. So that's going to be the hardest part, I think, and I don't have a great answer to that yet, I'm afraid. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think like it's more just like initial phases, probably we can look at it, but as they progress through it and depending on their demands, some might need a little bit more different, like, well, for example, they might need a little bit more like rate of force development, or all those kind of different parameters which fall in that neuromuscular category. How would you have like I guess, a guideline, I suppose, for progression as they go through it, and when that should be introduced, or like
Yeah, I guess that sort of thing is if you're looking for hurdle milestones and things that you want to be getting across there, you've got to have accurate tests that you can do clinically to measure these things, which I'm not sure that we have at the moment a lot of the time without isokinetic testing or force plates or things like that. I think dynamometry is probably a reasonable thing to be doing, and if you're looking at trying to emulate ASH tests or functional tests, or whether you're looking at other things like that, I think that'll be a bit of an issue, which you put me on the spot now, and I'm not entirely sure. It's the thing that I found as well is, in relation to what Margie was saying before, is that you are trying to account for that lowest common denominator, I suppose, and you want to make sure that you're not pushing someone further than they're able to be doing whatever it is, whether it's strength, movement, proprioception, any of these things, until they're ready for it. I think it is really challenging, and at the moment, what I'm finding is that surgeons have different protocols for different patients depending on who's running them through their rehab as well. So it's kind of like, this is my general protocol, which if you're going to one of the physios that are outside of our circle, I want you to follow that one because it's a lot more conservative and they don't do as much of this stuff, so maybe they're not as familiar. And I think the challenge will be trying to, as with anything, you're trying to condense experience in an area down to a set of criteria that you can hand on to somebody else who has less experience to be able to follow, which is, that translation in research is going to be really hard. So yeah, if you think of any ideas, feel free to reach out. But we've got some very, very basic things at the moment, which are around pain, range of motion, movement quality, patient confidence, a couple of functional tests and things like that. But it might be more a case of governing that criteria for the first couple of months or so. And then once they get there, it'll be a case of, now you need to be looking a little bit more sport specific and trying to figure out where they're heading from there, or sport or work specific, whatever it may be, and giving a little bit more freedom there, but maybe a little bit more, controlled in that initial period anyway. So, it's evolving as we speak.
Yeah. Does anyone have any more questions? Is there anything you think, like in terms of what you know now, that you want clinicians to know, of all the stuff that you know now, because I understand that you're reading and looking and talking to lots of different people. What do you think your take-home message should be for clinicians right now?
It's a good question. I think the thing that I've discovered is there's an enormous amount of variability all across the world with, whether it's surgeons, physios, different countries and things like that. There doesn't really seem to be any hard and fast clinical evidence on any of this stuff at all. So it's kind of a case of, if you're doing something and it's been very rigid and it hasn't been challenged or tested for a little while, very, very carefully, I guess, maybe have these discussions with the surgeons that you're working with, sort of suggest, if you've got someone in a sling for 6 weeks, the amount of atrophy, loss of neuromuscular control, neuroplasticity, loss of connective tissue. Even if you're putting stresses across something as it's healing, because I work with quite a lot of trauma as well, fractures and things, it's the same deal. You've got somebody who's had an elbow dislocation, fracture dislocation, terrible triad, something like that, right? And they've had this hardware put in there, and the surgeon's going, all right, I want you to move this straight away, right? And you want to push that range of motion, but no strengthening for 3 months, right? And it's like the forces going through that elbow with that degree of force, with the sort of range of motion stuff, is probably not going to be that dissimilar to, I guess, what you're doing with light bands or, isometric work, even things like that. So I guess, and I think it might be harder in Australia and New Zealand because things are very surgeon-led and it kind of trickles down to the physio. But if you've got that capacity to discuss these things with the surgeon and say, why are we doing it this way? Why do you think that's the case? And, we know around the other side of the world that they're doing things completely differently, and we don't have enough sort of evidence, I suppose, to say whether, it's better to have someone in a sling for 6 weeks or whether it's better to have them out, doing things from a couple of days after their surgery. And I guess, it's probably a little bit of a cop-out, but, challenge the protocols that you're using and try and sort of figure out exactly why they are like that and what the reasoning behind it is. And if there's no reasoning behind it, then maybe you can start thinking about, something to do within your practice setting and things to investigate whether you can get better outcomes. If you're very, very carefully challenging the status quo, I'm not suggesting you go and toss the sling to the wind and just start bench pressing from the second day after surgery. But, I think there's just as much risk with these things, immobilizing them for extended periods, as there is maybe, slowly pushing, holding them back, pushing them a little bit carefully if you've got a little bit of a feel there. So I don't know, challenge protocols and try and figure out exactly why they are the way that they are would be my advice.
Yeah, that's fabulous news because we have a bunch of target surgeons that we can take that to tomorrow. So thank you. Thanks very much for your time. That's been really wonderful. I'll let you know how we get on tomorrow.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for having me, guys. Great to meet you all, and I hope it goes well.
Yeah, thank you. See
All
ya.
right, take care. We'll see you around.
Thanks for joining us. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for joining us for today's podcast. I hope you've really enjoyed this content. You found some clinically useful tidbits and some of the content has been thought-provoking. If you have other ideas for content for these podcasts, then please reach out to me on social media. Don't forget you can follow me on my social media for some more up-to-date content. If you're looking for a shoulder brace, you can check that out via our shoulder braces on flawlessmotion.com. And if you wanted an online shoulder course, then I have a range of shoulder courses through from an introductory shoulder course through to return to sport and a shoulder instability course. You can access these courses on margieolds.com or flawlessmotion.com. That's flawlessmotion.com. And every course comes with a complimentary question and answer session so we can drill into your understanding of the key concepts of the course. You can also join our Facebook group, Glenohumeral Gurus, and follow along for the conversations and discussions on this page. And otherwise, I look forward to you joining us for the next podcast. Thanks for your time. Until then, stay well, take care.